It also has like an enterprise version. The only difference is that in the enterprise version you can access to the source code and the create native functionality. That's all. So Corona, may I know which of you have used this tool or have any knowledge of it? So what sort of how advanced are you in it? It's basic knowledge. Okay, it's fine. Then. Okay, so Corona is basically a 2E engine, and the functionality is very limited. It doesn't have a lot of functionality, but what it has is very powerful. It lets you do many things with it, and it's basically around manipulating images. So you can transform images very easily, load them. And just recently they added a new functionality that's called the graphics 2.0. I haven't used it too much, so I cannot speak too much about that, but there is basically about integrating with pixel shaders and doing some 2.5 transforms. It uses Lua for scripting, so how many of you have used Lua before? Okay, some of you. Lua is a very simple scripting language. Its main premise is on doing things very simple and trying to avoid redundancy so that you can have things very simple to use. So Corona is multi-platform. At the moment, they have support for iOS, Android, and Windows Phone 8, but they are working on time versions for Mac and Windows. And the tool can be run on Windows and Mac. That's basically some of the about the graphics 2.0. This is a small video on what some outstanding examples of what they have done with it. These are some of the things that some users have done with the new graphics engine. They seem quite complex. I haven't done anything like that. Most of what I have done is basically just 2D. I don't consider that using a 2D engine to 3D things is very clever, but there are some people that like to do that. They just love that, so it's perfectly fine. But if you are a game developer and you are trying to build some small game, it's just not worth it to go with something that's going to be more difficult. But this exposes some of the functionality that it has and its power.
So does the new graphics system allow 3D, but the old graphics system is just 2D, is that right?
No, it's, the new graphics system is just 2.0. That's transforms that are like here in 3D. Yeah, that's not really like completely rotating anything. I haven't seen anything like loading meshes or anything like that. It's just loading images and transform that. I haven't used it that much, to be honest. But just these are just some examples of what can be done with Corona. So the strengths of Corona is that it's very easy to use. You don't have to spend a lot of time learning it. The APIs are very simple, are very short. You can start programming very, very rapidly. My own experience with it was very good because usually with other tools, I usually have a lot of problems in like starting up with that, like trying to build the things. With Corona, it was very simple. I just started everything running from the beginning, so it was very painless. Lua is also widely used. If you go to Wikipedia, you can see that there are many engines that use Corona and also many other tools. So if you learn if you learn Lua for Corona, you are not wasting your time because it is more certainly that you'll encounter it somewhere else. The performance is very good. I didn't have any troubles like running it on Android or iOS, and my testing devices were very low specs. So I put a lot of sprites running on the screen, many images, no problem. The weaknesses is that the functionality is still limited, so you don't have full access to everything. For example, at the moment, I'm trying to build a small application to send MSS messages. And that's not possible without using some pop-up thing that it doesn't work very well with the client. So even though if I build that in Corona, that will be very fast, still the functionality doesn't allow me to do that. So in that case, it's not worth using Corona, but if you evaluate the requirements and like it's just moving images and handling images, this is a perfect option. It's very fast to develop. Another problem that Corona has is that you're not going to have access to vertices. So if you want to do something like skinning in 2D, it's just not possible. At the moment, I think they have something like lightning with boom maps, normal maps, sorry. The other problem is that colliders they don't scale with the image. So if you scale the image, the collider will not scale. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that was my experience. I haven't used much the new version, but.
Would that be classed as a bug, or is that a particular reason?
They haven't give like a particular reason. It's just that I don't know, like they use Box 2D as the physics engine underneath. So I'm not completely sure why they cannot scale the colliders automatically. But what you usually do is you delete the old collider and create a new one with the new size. That's basically the workaround. So my recommendations, if you want to use Corona, is evaluate the requirements. Obviously, Corona is not for all the users. But as I told you, this is a very good tool that will allow you to do things very quickly. So you have to determine what you want to do, because many people want to do a game and then they start doing something like native programming and then they spend years doing that. So, but if what you want to do is develop a game, then and it's going to be 2D, it's going to be just handling images. Corona is perfect. And it's just not for games. You can also develop many other apps. You have access to many other functionality. Also, I recommend it for prototyping. I have something I can show you here. So this is a small prototype that I did for an idea that I had for a game. It just took me some hours to create this. And this is another game that unfortunately I didn't do it completely on Corona, but the prototype I did it very quickly here. So it allowed me to validate the idea and see if that was worth working on that. Okay. So Lua is the scripting language used by Corona. It's a very simple language. I have some examples here that are probably not worth watching too much, but just to give you an idea of how things are done. So for example, this one is to call modules. So you can see that the first part here, that is the file in the module. You put that into one file. And basically, because Corona handles everything as tables, you just create one table here. You declare this is a table. And then here you can add attributes and add functionality. And then you request that functionality from another file here. You just call required and then the name of the file where you store that. And then you have access. My file will be equivalent to this one here. That's one thing. conditionals are very simple. The only difference that, for example, for programmers that come from a Java or C++ background is the else if, that it comes together. And it usually, it's a bit like confusing. Also the loops, you have the for and the while. The while just is the same as any other language, and the for it you define here the counter, and then here you find the condition. But this is not, this goes like this. This just goes like that. So you should say here that till it gets to length, and E is starting in 1 and incrementing by 1. So you can change that to minus length and then say -1 here or something, yeah, like that. Classes in Lua are not defined by the language, but you can still emulate that. There are two ways to do that. One is using meta tables, the other one is using something like closures. So closures, you basically encapsulate the variables inside the function, and then it's kept there. And then you can have, you can emulate something like private and public attributes. Here is an example. So this function here, I create a new table that's like an object. Then if I define here inside any variable, then that will be not accessible from outside. But if I put it here as an attribute as an attribute of this table, it will be accessible from outside. So you can see it here. Lua, you have to define everything as local variables. I suggest avoiding using globals. And in fact, I recommend using code to identify when you have created a global, because it's very easy that you have a typo and then you write something like, if I have here, like if I call this of JB because that's a typo, then Lua what it does is creates a global that's named like that. And then if I try to access that here, then it will create, what it will return is a null value. So it will create a bug. Okay. The other thing is optimization. So what they recommend is caching everything. So here you can have something like calling this method. It will have to index this in the table. So you will better have caching that into one variable than calling that from here. That's one way of optimizing code. Yeah, that's basically it. And almost everything in Lua, you will be using tables. So there are two ways to index tables. One is using integers. That's the most optimal way. And the other way is using strings. You can combine both. And you can access that with these two functions. One is iPairs. But it requires that all the indexes are integer. And then the other one is just pairs. But in the pairs case, it just index anything, just integers or strings or anything. Okay, that's Lua.
I think it's worth noting that the way it's very similar to JavaScript.
It's very similar, yes.
The way you define classes in JavaScript is almost exactly like you do it in Lua as well.
Yeah, it's very similar. And if you have been working with JavaScript, you'll find Lua very easy to start working with. The environment for Corona, it's basically composed of the simulator, where you can test your programs. And then you have some console output. Now they have changed it, and previously it was you have the debugger in the command line, but now they have something like a plugin for Sublime Text. That's a text editor. So if you use the Sublime Text, you can install the plugin, and then you can use it here. So you have here the options. You can run this code you can step into our functions and you can toggle a breakpoint here. It's not very convenient. I haven't used it much. I usually edit code using just JEdit, and then when I need to spot a variable, I just use a print. It's just easier for me, but because the tools that Corona provides are not very, for debugging, are not very fast to work with. So I just use a print and that makes it for me. But you still have some options there.
There was a Lua debugger released probably about a year ago now. Have you, I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. Have you used any other debuggers? Is it possible?
I use the one that comes with the command line. But I found it very cumbersome to use, so it was too slow for me to use it. So I just used it once, and then I just stopped using it. You can use any text editor, and now they have something called the Composer. That's a small application that allows you to create scenes and then put their images and objects and create some small interactions. I haven't used it at all. The project structure is you have a main file that's the entrance points for your application. Then you have a configuration file, a settings file. That's the most basic setting for your project. It's very counterintuitive. Sometimes when you start, you just at first it was just this. It was just the simulator, and then you have this project here, and then you didn't know where to go. But it's very simple. You just the simulator will run the main file, and that's the starting point, and will use the configuration and the settings and the build settings files to configure the environment. So the configuration file, you have the fitting scale. So that's basically two modes. That's one that scales completely to a resolution of the device, and the other one is one that keeps the aspect ratio. You can set up a reference resolution in there. You can say, I'm going to work with this resolution, and then Corona will automatically scale that to a fitting scale and move that to a reference. So if you say you locate an object in a 100, 100, and then it scales to double, then it automatically moves that to 200, 200, for say an example. You can set up also like high resolution images. So here you can say that what's the prefix, the suffix that those images will use, and then it automatically uses it. The frame rate, they use two frame rates. That is 30 frames per second, and the other one is 60 frames per second. If you want to use anti-aliasing and which audio frequency you want to use for your audio files, that will enables you to optimize the game, because the lower the frequency, the better, the less load it has on the device, less memory and less processing. The build settings will allow you to specify the orientation of the device, landscape, portrait, and the icons will have to follow the different naming conventions that they have for different platforms. The localization, which languages do you support? That's just for the App Store. And the permissions that you will be needing for Android. If you want to use the internet or any other things, you will have to specify them there. This is the main page for the documentation. So this is a small overview graphic of the Corona SDK. So you have access to different device hardware. You have the touch, you have the sound. Basically, you can just access a database through SQLite. That's very convenient instead of using files. And then you have functionality to handle images and doing animations with that using easing functions. And using sprites, you can add physics to that. You can add colliders, and then you can set the physics engine to handle the interactions, so you can do it yourself with triggers. You can use some widgets to ask for input. And then you can access the network. It has some basic functionality to handle JSON objects. And or the network, it also has some functionality predefined to handle Facebook, Google Maps, and in-app purchases, ad analytics. Very recommended that you use analytics for your game. That will tell you what you are doing wrong and what you are doing right. It's very easy to set up also. It's just setting an account and getting the ID for that account, and then just calling one function with an identifier that you recognize. That's all. The coordinate system for Corona, it starts at 0, 0 in the right top, ends in the left bottom. And if you want to know which resolution you have, you can query this display content width and display content height. The basic structure is you have groups, and groups are ways of organizing all the display objects that you will create. So the displayed objects are sprites, are images, are different graphics primitives like circles and rectangles. And all those you can assign events. Those can be a runtime or can be a callback to just the object. The group works as a transform if you have used Corona. If you have used Unity, it's similar to a transform. So you can move a full array of objects just with using a group. I have an example for that. Okay, so this is all set up as a group. So I created here an image and a rectangle with round corners and a circle. And this I will apply all the transforms to the whole group. So this cross is the pivot point. And then I can apply different transformations like rotation, translation, and scale. Groups can also be used as layers. So if you are working with 2D, you know that layers are one way to organize how the objects are ordered in which order they are displayed. So if you have a background and a foreground and the objects, then you can organize all of those using groups. So here you have all the displayed objects have these properties. So they have an X, Y property that allows you to translation. They have an unsure X and Y that allows you to modify which is the center of the object to do rotations. And then you can use rotation and scale X, scale Y to rotate using or to scale using just one parameter. So if you use these, you can also have these other ones that are methods scale and rotate. And the difference is that the first one just rotates to a number that you assign. The other one is just additive. So if there is a rotational array, it just adds that to a new one. So you have events. That's the way that you interact with many of the images of the displayed objects. So you have different sorts of events. You have touch events. You have enter frame events. That's basically the main loop. And then you assign there the logic of the game. You have two types of events. Ones are runtime that are global, and the other ones are just to each display object that are just triggered to that object in particular. So here you have a graphic object that has been assigned an event for touch. So if I touch here, it will recognize it. But outside, if I touch outside, it just doesn't know anything. And the other one is global. So if you want global, it's for everything, all the touch screen. So anywhere I touch, it will recognize the event. Also, you can have collision events. That's when you assign physics. I will talk a bit more about that later. Okay, here it is. You have three types: static, kinematic, and dynamic. It's similar if you have used Unity. You have to assign a rigid body to a one object in order to be triggered. So that's like using a dynamic. Oops. Then colliding that to kinematic in order to have the event, otherwise it doesn't trigger. As I said, the colliders rotate, but they cannot be scaled. They just stay the same. If you scale the image, the collider still remains the same. So this is a small example of setting up an object. You have to assign add the body to it. Then it just automatically handles the physics. It uses box GUI to do that underneath. So for the rigid bodies, you can have these sorts of colliders. That's rectangle, circle. You can create some vertices and assign that as a small mesh that the system will recognize. It has to be convex, though. I'm not sure about the last one. Okay. For physics, it's the best that you can do is assign masks. Masks are ways to organize the colliders, so that you know that, for example, if you want to collide this group with this another group, it's not going to collide with another group that is not of interest to you, and because that's a way to optimize. So underneath, the engine just knows that it will just compare these two and then send the signal, the event, but it will not compare with this other group because that's a full. It will take time to determine if they are colliding or not. For that, you have the category bits. Corona uses Lua, and Lua doesn't have bytes, so it just uses numbers. So you'll have to use 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, all the power of 2. And then you use the mask bits to determine which groups the assigned body will collide with. So here is an example. So group 1 collides with group 1 and 2. So it has a category bits 1, that's the group, and the mask bits is 1 and it's 1 and 2. So it sums to 3. That's basically how you do it. It's not that complicated. In many situations, you will not have like if you are doing a character and then you will have like a weapon and then you have like the head and the feet. So you'll have to assign different colliders to each one. That's one way to do it. You just create. You have to create a circle, then set it to not visible, and then just assign a collider to that, and then handle that interactions. Timers are ways to handle things with delay. So if you are doing something that's like interaction that requires to be triggered after a certain time interval, you use these functions. And transitions, you have two types of transitions. One that's going from one value to another, and one that comes from the value to another one. So that's one way to animate things here. So let me see if I have something for that. This one, another example that I forgot to show you. That's handling sensor collisions. And it doesn't collide with this one, with the one that's in the middle, but collides with the one underneath. That's because it's a trigger collision, so it just doesn't react to that. Okay, these are different kind of transitions that Corona has. Those are called easing functions, so you have that, and you can use that in different creative ways to create effects, to give the impression that something is happening, to create anticipation, different sorts of animation techniques. Okay. So these are some of the functions that were showing there. These are used to create some sort of visual eye candy so that people get engaged with the game. Are very recommended to use your games. Very easy to use. I'm going to show you a bit of code here. So calling one of these is very easy. It's just you call the transition. You can use from or to. Then you assign the time. And then you assign which parameter you want to change and to what position do you want to go. And then you assign the easing function that's anything of this, for example. You have here different sorts of functions. And then when it's finished, you can assign a callback method to or callback function to handle when it's finished. So it's very easy to use. This is a bit of an explanation how the from and to work. I already forgot a bit. Forgot how it works at the moment. I did it this slide so it goes, so I'm going to skip that. Sprites are very easy to define. You just set up a table defining each of the information for the sprite. You can have very detailed information that says where the frame is, or you can have something like just even resolution for each frame. So if you say like it's 100 by 100 image and you assign like 10 by 10 frames, that's one way. Or you can assign like this frame goes starts at this point and ends at this point, and then you can optimize for certain frames that are bigger than other ones. So here is an example of that. And then here is where you find the sprites. So here you can see that I can use the same frames like 1 to 20 with different sorts of times and different count loops to create different effects. And then you create you define which is the resolution and number of frames and the total size of the image. And then you just create the sprite and use it. It's not difficult. Doing this is just these lines of code here, and this is because I'm handling certain events here, but it's very easy. It's not something like if you have done something in like C++ where you have some libraries are very you have to provide very detailed information of every aspect of the sprite. So this is very simple to use. Another option is to use image sheets. These are like sprites, but instead of creating one image for each object, you can just create one single image with different objects in it, and then you can use just parts of that as in an atlas, if you have used that. This is an optimization. So if you have something like different images, you can put them all together and set them up in just one file, and then use that instead of loading different images into memory. So it's a very good optimization. This is an example of using a combination of sprite animation and using with animations using forget the name, transition, and then it just to show you the kind of things that you can do. You just set up this just physics object setup, and then it reacts when it collides. It moves the triggers the animation, and then the other object, the one down, it triggers the transition. So it has a easing function there. Okay, I'm not very into testing with Corona, particularly because I usually do everything very quickly, and testing is something that you usually have for things that are very robust, and you want to you have a very defined requirements that you already know that are not going to change. But if you are doing something like prototyping and very quick iterations with games. In my case, I didn't feel like using much testing, but there are many alternatives. For Lua, I have used Busted. It's a behavior-driven development framework. And basically, the way it is used, it's just the same as if you have used something similar for JavaScript or anything else. You just have the describe it and the assertions.
So each describe is a unit test, is that right?
Yes, it's a behavior-driven development tool to testing, and I haven't used it too much, to be honest, but yeah, that's the one that I have used for Lua. It's the same functions that you can find in any tool of the same type.
To the Jasmine framework in JavaScript, but it has describe to describe a test suite, and it has like a different function to describe an actual unit test. But it looks like in that it was using describe for everything.
You can have different describes. It's not. It's just that I organize everything like that. But you can have different ones separated. Yeah. So in conclusion, Corona is not for all the situations, but when you can use it, it's a very good tool because. It's very fast that you can develop something that otherwise, if you go with something native code, will take months, and this is just a matter of some days. So very recommended for artists, very easy to learn, very easy to use. Yeah, that's it. And the future, Corona has been acquired by Fuse. So now they have a bit more of a cache available, I suppose. So probably, I think it will stay around for a while at least. Okay, that's it. Any questions?
Can we have a look at some of the sample code?
Yeah, sure. Which?
Maybe that one where you've got the box sort of bouncing around.
So,
what's the biggest project you've used it in so far?
I have created a bunch of games, that's all. But if you like it can get many conditions, and then it starts to get very long. Like after I'm not completely sure, but after a certain number of lines, just you have to separate into another file, or else it just doesn't allow you to continue using it, because it has something called app values that it stores in each function. So after a certain number is reached, you cannot continue creating new variables.
Are you familiar with multimedia fusion?
No, not at all.
I wanted to know whether this, how you compared the two. Does it have, you talked about having sprite sheets and things, does it have an interface where it can automatically import a whole series of
Yes.
of individual images into an animation?
Yes, there are tools that allow you to do many things like that, but those are paid, so you'll have to pay for those. But it's not that much, like $50 or less for a tool to.
Included in the $79 a month package, wouldn't it?
Sorry, I didn't.
It would be included in the $79 a month package?
No, it's not included. It's completely apart. It's just for another vendor. It's not the Corona. It's external tool,
Right.
third party, but still it's not that expensive.
What about importing or playing video?
That's something that I haven't done much. But video, you just have like a player where you play the video. It's not very nice, really. It's not something like where you can integrate it into like a widget or something. It's just, it creates like a widget there that's like the native one, or something like that. And
Well, I'm just thinking brief cutscenes in between levels, kind of just a quick cutscene. So short videos to play in between levels, they load up.
you can do it, but yes, you can do it. But it's not that difficult. Yeah, the same for like taking photographs and videos, but it automatically triggers like a small widget that's like the native one. Yeah.
Is there much in the way of plugins and enhancements for this?
Uh,
Third-party developers?
There are some plugins out there, but it's not that big. But you still have something like, like Sprites and the particles text.
What about commercialization options like in-game advertising, in-game purchases? Does it link in? Does it have any third-party link-in options with Google Play or AdWords?
Yes. It has with Google Play and Amazon Kindle, the App Store. I'm not completely sure about all the gamut of plugins that it has for all the different app stores, but at least the big ones it has. And the same for advertisement. They have different options. But at the moment, because they are now purchased by Fuse, so Fuse is a company that provides advertisement. I'm not completely sure how it's going to be in the future.
Do you have any idea how many commercial games have actually been used to Chrome?
No idea. But there have been some that had been successful, but not too many. And some big studios like, I forgot the name, but for some games like the Lorax, there was a movie or something like that. Then they did something with this, but it was something like Candy Crush. Yeah.
About exporting to different devices, when you actually build and then put onto, say, Android or iPhones, do you find that it actually, that you're happy with the results, that the actual performance speed is okay, and that it looks okay on one, compared to another?
My experience has been that as long as it displays correctly in the simulator, it will display mostly the same in the device. And the scaling is just, as I said, that you configure it in the configuration file and then it just automatically works. Yep. It's not that difficult, really.
Cool.
And in general, the less complicated your application is, the better. It's not worth with the two types of objects that you can create. You can have the meta tables and you can have the closures. And the closures are probably more expensive in terms of memory, but are easier to use and easy to understand. And apparently they are quicker than the meta table ones. So.
Is there some kind of scene or level editing tool to help you create structures, groups, objects, properties?
There is the composer that's provided by Corona for free, and there is also third-party applications that allow you to do that. I personally don't like it too much. I prefer to do it by hand, but in some cases, yes, you can improve your speed using some of those tools, but I haven't used them much.
Do they spit out some XML or some JSON so you could put it in and interpret it? Or?
They basically create a Lua file, and then the Lua file is just basically a table. Yeah, it's similar to JSON.
Yeah, there we
go. Yeah.
But an interesting bit of trivia, Lua actually, you probably know, sorry Greg, but Lua was originally a configuration language that grew into a programming language. Like it was only ever designed for big configuration, and due to the performance of it, the high performance of it as a language, it became popular in game development.
Interesting. Yeah, so I see there is a kit here. Yeah, there have been many cases of kits doing applications with Corona and deploying that to the App Store and being successful.
Any advanced features in handling text, for fonts and text?
There are some external tools that allows you to create more beautiful fonts, but you can just import anything, like I think it's TTF, I'm not sure. Okay. Yeah, the name of the text file, the font file. You were saying about fonts, do you?
Fonts and text, load some, use some different typesets and display some words on the screen, whether it's high score numbers or menus.
Yeah, absolutely. You can use different text font files. It's not a problem. It's just you set up that in the, I think it's the configuration file, and then you just use that. It's fairly simple.
Since we're talking about fonts, so I have a question about localization. The localization, so is it come with any SDK we can use for the localization to use Corona?
I haven't used any third-party plugins or anything. What I did was using just Lua files. So because it is so easy to use, like tables, and then you assign the indexes of the, if you want to do something like string text, a label, and then you just use the, you reference that by an index, and then you use that index inside your another localization file. When you reference that, then you have all the text for that language. And then, you just change that in another functionality. You say, I'm going to use this file that's just using required. And then you load that, you pass that, and then you index that table that's inside that file. I don't know if I'm very clear, but if I... Something like this here. So
There's something already integrated with this engine, or it's like we need to actually work from the localization. So my question is there anything already there we can integrate functions or modules we can use directly? Because that's the way we do localization, but is there already something there we can use?
I'm not aware of that, to be honest, but the way I did it was just creating here a table like... Then if you call this from another module, then you'll have, you just reference this label as Word. Then if you have it in Japanese in this file, it just picks that up. Then if you create another file that has, then you put it in another file, the same thing, and then you put it, I don't know, in Portuguese, you know, read it. And then you just select which module you want to load for the language. So it's not very difficult because the way Lua works with tables make it very easy to handle those situations. So I'm not sure that anybody has done anything like internationalization, sort of the visual interface for that, but it's not difficult to do it manually.
So technically we use code to handle. I mean, usually people use Excel files, so they put in different column and then absorb the data from the Excel file and then do the localization. So I was asking if we have that already, or we can. I mean, we of course can do the code way to do it. But does Corona have something we can just use it?
I'm not aware that they have anything to do that, but
Can you load like JSON files, XML files?
you can load JSON files. Yeah.
Then if you had any kind of localization editor that exported those types, you could just load them in. So there's probably some third-party solution for that.
Or you can create your own tool. It's not that difficult, really. Just exporting that to comma-separated values and then just having loaded that into a table.
But encoding will be a problem in the programming. Just something, right? Encoding, because the Chinese use PDF8, but English is using different. Traditional Chinese use P5. So,
As long as you set the file as UTF-8, I think. So,
encoding.
yeah, the encoding, that will handle anything. I did it I translate my app to Arabic and Japanese, Chinese, German, and Spanish and English. And I didn't have any sort of trouble, you know, like they changed the, you know, like the way they, you know, the direction where they are go, like one starting this side, the other starting this side, go this side, but still it's not a problem there. I didn't have any trouble at all.
Thanks.
Okay, so that's it.
Thanks, Boris.
Thanks for coming.